For many years, the man had lived alone in the wild. His cabin stood deep inside the endless forest. Far from towns, far from any voice but his own, he had built it with his hands. Piece by piece, a shelter of wood and stone. His world was quiet, sometimes too quiet. The sound of birds at dawn, the wind through the trees, the crackle of fire at night. These were his only companions. He was not young anymore. His beard had grown thick, his hands rough from years of chopping wood, hunting and carrying water, but his eyes still held a sharpness, a light that had not died. He had learned to live with silence, but silence was heavy. It pressed down on him in the long nights when shadows stretched across the walls. In those moments he remembered the world he had lost, the people he once knew, the voices now gone. Years had passed since he had last seen another soul. Sometimes he wondered if he had become the last man alive. The forest was full of dangers, strange beasts, cold storms, and whispers of raiders who hunted travelers. But none of them had come near his cabin in a long time. The wild respected his solitude, and he respected it back. Yet deep inside, loneliness grew like a slow fire. He spoke to himself at times just to hear a voice. He carved figures of wood and lined them on the shelf, pretending they were company. He told himself he was strong, that he needed no one. But when night fell and the stars stared down from the black sky, his heart ached for something more. One winter evening, as snow drifted across the ground and the fire in his cabin burned low, the silence broke. A sound cut through the night. A knock. 3 times on his door the man froze. His breath caught in his chest. For years no one had ever come. His hand reached for the old rifle resting by the wall. Another knock came, softer this time, followed by a faint sound. A cry like that of a child. His heart pounded. He moved toward the door slowly, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. His mind raced. Who could it be? On a raider? A beast mimicking human sound? Or had loneliness finally made him imagine things? He gripped the handle but did not open it right away. Who is there? He called, his voice cracked, unused to speaking to others. For a moment there was only silence, then came a weak reply. The voice of a woman, shaking, desperate. Please, she said. Help us. My child? The man's blood ran cold. It was real, not a trick of his mind. He lifted the bar holding the door shut. The hinges groaned as he pulled it open. And there, framed by the swirling snow, stood 2 figures. The first was a woman, her skin pale with exhaustion, her clothes torn and dusted with frost. Her eyes were not human. They glowed faintly. The mark of another world. She leaned against the door frame, her body weak behind her, clutching tightly to her leg, was a little girl, also alien, her eyes wide with fear. The girl's cheeks were streaked with tears. Her small hands trembled as she looked up at the man. The woman's lips quivered as she spoke again. We have nowhere else. Please do not turn us away. The man stared, his chest tightened. For years he had prayed for company, for another voice. But now that it was here, his fear rose higher than his hope. What if they were danger? Or what if letting them in destroyed everything he had built? And yet, as the snow thickened and the child's eyes begged silently, he felt something stir inside him, something he thought long dead. The memory of what it meant to care. He lowered his rifle. His voice was low but steady. Come in, he said, before the cold takes you. And with that choice, his years of silence came to an end. The man stepped aside, and the woman and her child entered the cabin. The warmth of the fire touched their frozen skin, and the little girl shivered as if her body had forgotten what heat felt like. Snow melted from their ragged clothes, leaving small puddles on the wooden floor. The man closed the door quickly, bolting it shut again. The night outside roared with icy wind, but inside silence returned, broken only by the crackling fire. The widow stood weakly near the hearth, her arms around the child. Her face was sharp with exhaustion, her eyes wary. She looked at the man as if every heartbeat might bring danger. The little girl hid her face in her mother's side, peeking out only once before hiding again. The man placed his rifle back against the wall, yet he kept it within reach. Trust was not given so easily. His life alone had taught him that. He studied them with cautious eyes. The woman's skin shimmered faintly under the firelight, marked by thin lines that traced across her cheeks and neck, lines that no human bore. The child shared the same marks, though softer, as if painted by a gentler hand. He cleared his throat, his voice rough from long silence. Who are you? The woman hesitated. Her lips moved, but no words came. Finally, she whispered, We are Refugees, she held the child tighter. We ran for days. No food, no shelter. The cold would have taken us if not for your light. The man frowned. He had seen no one for years, heard no voices but his own. Yet now, in the dead of winter, a widow and her child appeared at his door. His instincts screamed at him to send them away. But his heart, his lonely, aching heart, pulled against that thought. He reached for a pot hanging over the fire, filled with stew made from rabbit and root vegetables. He ladled some into a bowl and placed it on the table. The woman's eyes flickered toward it, but she did not move. Her pride or her fear held her still. It was the child who finally tugged at her arm, whispering softly, "Mother, I'm hungry." The woman's shoulders sagged. She guided her daughter forward. The girl climbed onto the wooden bench, her small hands clumsy as she lifted the spoon. She tasted the stew and her eyes widened. She ate quickly, as if each bite might vanish before she could finish it. The man watched in silence, his chest tightened. He had eaten alone for so long that the sight of another at his table felt unreal. When the child coughed, he reached instinctively for a cloth but stopped halfway. The mother had already placed her hand on the girl's back, soothing her with quiet words in a tongue he did not know. When the bowl was empty, the child leaned against her mother. Her eyelids heavy, the woman stroked her hair, whispering, "Rest, little one." Then her eyes turned back to the man. Cold and sharp again. "Why do you live here, human?" she asked. Her voice carried both suspicion and curiosity. The man looked into the fire. The flames danced, painting shadows across his face. "Because I chose it," he said at last. His words were simple, but the weight behind them was heavy. He had left behind a world of war, a world that had broken too many men. He did not need to explain more, and she did not press further. Still, he could feel her gaze on him, testing, measuring. She was not only a widow, but a survivor. He could see it in the way she held herself, always ready to protect the child, always expecting betrayal. The night stretched long. The wind clawed at the cabin walls. Inside, the fire burned low. The child slept, curled in her mother's arms. The man sat across the room, sharpening his knife, his eyes never leaving the two strangers, and yet something was changing. The silence that had once been his prison was no longer the same. The cabin no longer felt empty. The air carried the soft sound of another's breath, the rustle of clothing, the faint sighs of a sleeping child. It was strange, unsettling, but also comforting. The man did not know what tomorrow would bring. He did not know if danger had followed them, if their presence would destroy his fragile peace. But as the storm raged outside and the cabin held 3 souls instead of 1, he realized one truth he could not deny. For the first time in years, he was not alone. Morning came slowly. The storm outside had softened, leaving the forest buried under a thick blanket of white. The man rose early, as he always did. He stoked the fire, checked the traps he had set the night before, and sharpened his axe. But this time he was not alone. When he turned, he saw the widow and her child still curled together on the bench, the girl's tiny form pressed against her mother's chest. For a moment the man simply stood there watching. His cabin had never looked so different. The walls were the same, the tools were the same, the shelves filled with jars of dried meat and roots were the same, and yet the space felt warmer, as if the simple act of 2 strangers breathing had changed everything. When the widow stirred, her eyes opened slowly. She tightened her hold on the child before noticing the man watching. Her gaze hardened at once. Sharp and guarded, she sat up, pulling the girl closer. "You should eat," the man said, placing a bowl of porridge on the table. His voice was calm, but he noticed her hands twitch, ready to shield the child. The little girl was the first to move. Her small nose caught the scent of food, and she tugged gently at her mother's arm. The woman hesitated, then slowly guided her daughter forward. The girl climbed onto the bench again, her eyes glancing at the man before settling on the steaming bowl. She ate in small bites, shy but eager. The man sat opposite them. Tearing a piece of bread, he chewed in silence. His eyes studied the woman carefully. Her cheekbones were sharp from hunger, her skin pale from cold, but her eyes, those strange glowing eyes, were alive with fire. "Why are you here?" he asked at last. His tone was not cruel but steady. "No one comes this deep, not without reason." The widow looked at him, her jaw tightening. For a long time she said nothing. The only sound was the crackle of the fire and the faint clink of the child's spoon. Finally she whispered, "We ran. From what?" He pressed. Her lips trembled. Her hand touched the girl's hair as if to shield her from the words, "From men. From chains. From those who see us as nothing but property." Her voice broke, and she turned away, staring into the flames. The man's chest tightened. He knew of such cruelty. He had seen it in the wars. He had seen children broken, women lost, families torn apart. The memory of screams, fire, and iron echoed inside him. The child looked up at him then, her spoon still in her hand. Her voice was soft, almost too soft to hear. "Are you going to send us away?" The man froze. He had not expected the question. The girl's eyes were wide, filled with fear and hope. His throat tightened. He wanted to speak but found no words. Finally, he shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "Not while the cold still hunts you." Relief washed across the child's face. She leaned back into her mother, who still looked uncertain, but less hard. Still fear lingered in the cabin. The man could feel it pressing against the air. The widow's shoulders were tense. Every glance she gave him was heavy with doubt. She was in his shelter, but her heart remained outside in the snow. Later that day, the man took his axe and went to chop wood. The air was sharp, biting at his skin from the corner of his eye. He noticed movement at the cabin window. The child's face pressed against the glass, watching him. Her breath fogged the glass as she followed his every move. When their eyes met, she ducked away, but not before he caught a small smile. When he returned, arms full of logs, the woman was waiting near the door. "Why help us?" she asked sharply. Her eyes narrowed. "Humans are not known for kindness to our kind." The man dropped the wood onto the floor. His voice was low, steady. "Because I know what it is to be hunted. Because I know what it is to be alone." The woman studied him. Her expression unreadable. At last she turned away, guiding her daughter back to the fire, but her silence carried less suspicion than before. Night came again. The wind howled beyond the walls. Inside, the fire burned. 3 shadows flickered against the wooden walls instead of one. The man sat with his rifle across his lap. The woman sat with her daughter in her arms. Both watched the flames, lost in thought. The silence was no longer empty. It was heavy, filled with unspoken questions, with fear and hope twisting together. The man did not know what dangers had followed them, but he knew this truth. His life was no longer his alone. The fire burned low as night stretched deep across the forest. The man sat in his chair, sharpening the blade of his hunting knife. His eyes kept drifting to the 2 strangers who had changed his world. The widow sat close to the flames with her daughter asleep in her arms. Her face was tired, but her eyes stayed open. Always watching, always listening. The cabin was small, but in that small space the air felt full. It was no longer only the smell of smoke and wood. It carried the quiet sound of another's breathing, the soft sigh of a child's dream. For the man, it was both comfort and unease. He had wished for voices for years, and now that they were here, he did not know how to live with them. At last the widow spoke. Her voice was quiet but sharp. "You asked what we ran from," she said. Her fingers brushed her daughter's hair. "I will tell you now, so you will understand the danger we bring." The man set the knife aside and leaned forward. His eyes narrowed as he listened. "We were slaves," she whispered. Her voice trembled, but her gaze stayed hard. "Taken from our home, sold like cattle. My mate died in the mines, beaten until his body gave out. I was left with my child, made to serve men who saw us as less than animals." She paused, her throat tight, her breath shaking. "We escaped in the dark, ran through the woods, through storms, through hunger, always hunted, always afraid." Her words sank into the cabin like stones into water. The man clenched his fists. His jaw tightened as memories clawed up from his own past. He too had seen chains. He too had seen cruelty carved into the faces of the innocent. The widow looked at him then, her glowing eyes sharp with suspicion. "Now you know," she said, "we do not bring peace. Human raiders hunt us if they find us here. They will not spare you either." The man's chest rose and fell slowly. His voice was low, steady. "Then let them come." The woman blinked, surprised. "Why?" "Because I am tired of silence," he said. His eyes burned with a quiet fire. "And because no one deserves chains." For the first time, her face softened just slightly. The hard lines of fear and pride eased. She looked down at her daughter, then back at the man. A whisper escaped her lips, almost too soft to hear. "Perhaps not all humans are monsters." The cabin grew quiet again, but it was a different kind of silence, no longer sharp with mistrust. It carried the weight of secrets shared, of wounds revealed. The child stirred in her sleep, murmuring softly, The woman soothed her with gentle words. Her voice, though weary, carried tenderness. The man turned away, hiding the ache in his chest. For years he had lived with no one to care for, no one to speak to, and now before him was a bond forming, fragile but real. The wind outside howled, rattling the shutters. The forest groaned under the weight of snow, but inside a strange warmth lingered. It was not safety, not yet, but it was something close. Later, when the fire was only embers, the man sat awake while the widow and her child slept. His rifle rested across his knees, his ears strained for sounds beyond the cabin walls. He thought he heard movement once, a branch snapping in the dark, but the night gave no answer. Still, unease gnawed at him. Danger was near. He could feel it. The woman's story was not only memory. Shadows followed her, and sooner or later, those shadows would arrive. But as he looked at the child's small hand resting against her mother's chest, and the widow's tired face softened in sleep, he made a silent vow. If the past came knocking, he would be ready. The morning sky was gray when the man stepped outside. The forest stood silent under heavy snow. Branches weighed down like tired arms. He carried his axe to the woodpile, each swing echoing through the frozen air. His breath rose in clouds, sharp against the cold, but something felt wrong. He paused, gripping the axe handle tightly. His eyes scanned the tree line. The forest was too quiet. Birds should have stirred at dawn, but none sang. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Inside the cabin, the widow tended to the fire. Her daughter sat close, humming softly to herself. The woman's ears twitched, her instincts sharp. She froze, sensing the same unease that pressed against the man outside. Then it came, the crunch of boots on snow, faint but steady. The man's head snapped toward the sound. His heart tightened. He knew those steps. The rhythm of men who walked with purpose, not wanderers, not lost souls, but hunters. He dropped the axe and rushed inside. His voice was low but urgent. "Get back. Both of you." The widow's eyes widened. She clutched her daughter. "Who is it?" The man snatched his rifle from the wall, checking the chamber. His jaw clenched. "Raiders." Fear flashed across the widow's face. Her arms tightened around the child. "They followed us," she whispered. The little girl whimpered, burying her face in her mother's chest. The man's eyes softened for only a heartbeat, then hardened again. He moved to the window. Peering through the narrow gap, figures emerged from the trees, 3 men, wrapped in furs, weapons slung across their backs. Their faces were scarred, their eyes sharp with hunger and cruelty. They walked with confidence as if the forest itself belonged to them. The man's finger rested on the trigger, but he did not fire, not yet. He knew what bullets could do, but he also knew what noise would bring. More raiders might be near. Watching, waiting, the widow rose slowly, her hand trembling. "We should run," she whispered. The man shook his head. "The snow is too deep. You'd never make it. They'd hunt you down before nightfall." His voice was steady, but inside his chest his heart hammered. The raiders stopped near the edge of the clearing. Their leader, a broad man with a jagged scar down his cheek, pointed toward the cabin, his lips twisted into a cruel smile. "They know," the man muttered. His grip tightened on the rifle. The widow's breath came fast. She pressed her daughter's face against her shoulder, shielding her eyes. "If they find us, they will take her," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They will take my child." The man turned to her then. His voice was low, fierce. "Not while I still breathe." She looked at him, her eyes glowing with fear and doubt, but in that moment, a spark of trust flickered between them, fragile but real. The raiders began to move closer. Crunching snow beneath their boots, the man raised the rifle, aiming through the gap in the shutter. His breath slowed, steadying his hands. He squeezed the trigger. The crack shattered the forest silence. One raider fell back into the snow, clutching his leg with a scream. The others dove for cover, shouting. Their leader roared, lifting his axe, rage burning in his eyes. Inside, the child cried out, clinging to her mother. The widow whispered comfort, but her own voice shook. She looked toward the man. Her jaw set, and for the first time she did not see him as a stranger but as a shield. The cabin walls shook with the sound of footsteps charging closer. The man reloaded quickly, his movements sharp, practiced. He had not fought in years, but the fire inside him had not died. When the door rattled under the weight of fists, the widow rose, her hands glowed faintly, strange energy sparking across her skin. The man's eyes widened, but there was no time for questions. Together they stood ready. The raiders had come to claim slaves. But what they found was resistance. The man and the widow, bound by fear and fragile trust, now faced the storm together. And in that moment, the man realized something he had long forgotten. He was not only fighting to survive, he was fighting for something greater. He was fighting for them. The cabin walls shook from the pounding fists. The man braced the door with his shoulder, his rifle ready. His breath came sharp, but his hands did not tremble. Behind him, the widow crouched low, holding her daughter close. Her eyes glowed faintly in the firelight, sparks of strange energy flickering across her fingertips. The raiders shouted outside, their voices rough. Promising pain, promising chains. The man knew those voices well. He had heard them on battlefields long ago. He had seen what men like them did to the weak. His jaw tightened. He would not allow it again. One raider burst through the window, glass shattering across the floor. The man spun, his rifle cracking loud. The intruder fell back, his scream swallowed by the storm outside. The child cried out, clinging to her mother. The widow pressed her lips to her daughter's hair, whispering, "It is all right. I will not let them take you." But her own voice shook with fear. The door shuddered again, wood splintering. The man barked, "Stay down." He fired once more through the broken shutter, another raider dropping into the snow. The leader cursed, rallying his men. The fight was not over. Then something strange happened. The widow rose slowly, setting her child behind the table, her glowing hands stretched toward the door, energy swirling like threads of light. The man glanced at her, stunned, but said nothing. He only held his ground. The door burst open, the leader storming in with his axe raised. His eyes burned with cruelty. He saw the widow and child, and his lips curled into a hungry smile. "Slaves," he spat. "You will fetch a high price." Before the man could fire, the widow unleashed her power. Light struck the raider, throwing him back against the wall. His axe clattered across the floor. The man wasted no time. He charged forward, slamming the butt of his rifle into the raider's jaw. The man collapsed in the snow at the threshold, silent and still. Silence fell heavy, broken only by the crackle of fire and the widow's ragged breathing. Her hands shook, sparks fading from her skin. The man looked at her, his chest rising hard. "You never said," he muttered. She met his gaze, her voice weak. "Would you have trusted me if I had?" He had no answer. His eyes fell on the child, who peeked out from behind the table. Her wide eyes shimmered with tears, but also with wonder. "Mama," she whispered. "You stopped him." The widow pulled her close, her body trembling as relief washed over her. The man dragged the raider's body outside, covering it with snow. He returned to find the widow watching him, her arms wrapped tight around her daughter. For the first time, her eyes carried something other than fear. They carried gratitude. "You saved us," she said softly. The man shook his head. "No, we saved each other." That night, the cabin felt different again. The air was still tense, but beneath it was something new. Trust, fragile but growing. The widow no longer looked at the man as only a danger. The child no longer hid her face. Instead, she sat near him, whispering questions. "Do you hunt every day? Do you fight wolves? Do you know the stars?" Her voice carried innocence he thought long gone. He answered in short words, unused to conversation. But the child's laughter, small, bright, pure, cut through years of silence. It stirred something deep inside him, something he thought had died with his past. Later, when the girl slept, the widow spoke again. "We cannot stay hidden forever," she said. Her voice was tired but stronger than before. "More will come." "They always come," the man nodded, staring into the fire. "Then we prepare," he said. "If they want to fight, they will find one." She studied him, her glowing eyes softer now. "You are not what I expected," she whispered. Neither was she, he thought. But he did not say it aloud. The snow fell heavy outside, covering the raiders' tracks. Inside, 3 souls sat by the fire, no longer strangers. Their bond was not yet unbreakable, but it was stronger than fear. And for the first time in years, the man felt something dangerous, something powerful, hope. The storm had passed, leaving the forest heavy with silence. The bodies of the raiders lay hidden beneath the snow. Already claimed by the cold, the man stood at the doorway, staring out across the trees. His rifle hung loosely at his side. His breath rose in slow clouds. Behind him, the cabin carried the soft sound of life. The widow tended to the fire, her hands moving with quiet care. Her daughter hummed while arranging small pieces of wood like toys. Her laughter spilled into the room, bright and warm for the man. It was a sound sharper than any blade, It cut through years of emptiness. He stepped back inside, closing the door. The widow looked at him, her glowing eyes softer than before. For days, she had studied him with suspicion. But now something had changed. She did not flinch when he moved. She did not guard her child from his shadow. Instead, she nodded once, as if acknowledging a truth neither of them could deny. "We cannot stay hidden here forever," she said. Her voice carried the weight of her past. "But for now, it is safe." She glanced at her daughter. "And safe is more than we have had in a long time." The man lowered his rifle onto the wall. His eyes traced the small figure of the girl, who was now carving shapes into the wooden floor with a stick. She looked up at him and grinned, a tooth missing, her innocence untouched by the darkness she had survived. He felt a warmth in his chest he had not known in years. "You will need more food," he said, "more wood for the fire, stronger walls for the storms." The widow tilted her head. "You speak as if we belong here." His jaw tightened, but his eyes stayed on the fire. "You do if you choose it." The silence stretched, heavy but not cold. The widow looked at him long, her daughter curled against her side. At last she whispered, "Then we will stay, at least until the world forces us to move again." That night, the three of them sat around the fire together. The girl leaned against the man's arm. Half asleep, the widow watched with cautious eyes. But she did not pull her child away. Instead, she let her rest there, as if she too had begun to believe he was not danger but shelter. Outside, the forest groaned under the weight of snow. But inside the cabin, warmth held. The man felt the silence differently now. It was no longer empty. It was filled with breaths, with voices, with hope later. When the child slept, the widow spoke quietly. "I do not know what tomorrow will bring. I only know the raiders will not stop, and yet, for the first time since my mate died, I feel something I thought was gone." The man's voice was steady. "What is that?" "Belonging," she said. Her eyes shimmered in the firelight. He did not answer. But the word echoed in his chest, belonging. He had not belonged anywhere since the war. He had not belonged with anyone since the world had turned cruel. And now, with two strangers, an alien widow and her child, he felt it again. Fragile but real. The girl stirred in her sleep, whispering something soft. Her small hand reached out and rested against the man's arm. He looked down at it, rough fingers brushing over her tiny palm. A strange ache filled him, but it was not pain. It was something gentler. The widow saw it, and for the first time, her lips curved into a faint smile. When the fire burned low, the man rose to check the shutters. His eyes scanned the dark tree line. He knew danger would return one day, perhaps sooner than they wished. But tonight, in this moment, they were safe. He turned back to the cabin, to the widow's glowing eyes and the child's soft breathing. And in that moment, he understood a truth that had taken him years to find. He was no longer alone.